The Battle of Hattin took place on the 4th of July 1187, between the Crusader states of the Levant and the forces of the Ayyubid Sultan Salahuddin. It is also known as the Battle of the Horns of Hattin, due to the shape of the nearby extinct volcano of Kuran Hattin. The Muslim armies under Salahuddin captured or killed the vast majority of the Crusader forces, removing their capability to wage war. As a direct result of the battle, Muslims once again became the eminent military power in the Holy Land, reconquering Jerusalem and many of the other Crusader-held cities. These Christian defeats prompted the Third Crusade, which began 2 years after the Battle of Hattin. On July 3, the Frankish army started out towards Tiberias, harassed constantly by Muslim archers. They passed the springs of Turan, which were entirely insufficient to provide the army with water. At midday, Raymond of Tripoli decided that the army would not reach Tiberias by nightfall, and he and Guy agreed to change the course of the march and veer to the left in the direction of the springs of Kava Hattin, only 6 miles (9.7 kilometers) away. From there they could march down to Tiberias the following day. The Muslims positioned themselves between the Frankish army and the water so that the Franks were forced to pitch camp overnight on the Arab plateau near the village of Meskena. The Muslims surrounded the camp so closely that a cat could not have escaped. According to Ibn al-Athar, the Franks were despondent, tormented by thirst, whilst Saladin's men were jubilant in anticipation of their victory. Throughout the night the Muslims further demoralized the Crusaders by praying, singing, beating drums, showing symbols, and chanting. They set fire to the dry grass, making the Crusaders' throats even drier. The Crusaders were now thirsty, demoralized and exhausted. The Muslim army by contrast had a caravan of camels bring goatskins of water up from Lake Tiberias. On the morning of July 4th, the Crusaders were blinded by smoke from the fires set by Saladin's forces. The Franks came under fire from Muslim mounted archers from the division commanded by Gogbori, who had been resupplied with 400 loads of arrows that had been brought up during the night. Gerard and Reynold advised Guy to form battle lines and attack, which was done by Guy's brother Amalric. Raymond led the 1st Division with Raymond of Antioch, the son of Bohemund III of Antioch, while Balian and Jocelyn III of Edessa formed the rearguard. Thirsty and demoralized, the Crusaders broke camp and changed direction for the springs of Hattin, but their ragged approach was attacked by Saladin's army, which blocked the route forward and any possible retreat. Count Raymond launched 2 charges in an attempt to break through to the water supply at Lake Tiberias. The second of these enabled him to reach the lake and make his way to Tyre. After Raymond escaped, Guy's position was now even more desperate. Most of the Christian infantry had effectively deserted by fleeing in a mass onto the Horns of Hattin, where they played no further part in the battle. Overwhelmed by thirst and wounds, many were killed on the spot without resistance, while the remainder were taken prisoner. Their plight was such that 5 of Raymond's knights went over to the Muslim leaders to beg that they be mercifully put to death. Guy attempted to pitch the tents again to block the Muslim cavalry. The Christian knights and mounted sergeants were disorganized, but still fought on. Now the Crusaders were surrounded and, despite 3 desperate charges on Saladin's position, were broken up and defeated. An eyewitness account of this is given by Saladin's 17-year-old son, Al-Athal. It is quoted by Muslim chronicler Ibn al-Athar. When the king of the Franks, Guy, was on the hill with that band, they made a formidable charge against the Muslims facing them, so that they drove them back to my father Saladin. I looked towards him and he was overcome by grief and his complexion pale. He took hold of his beard and advanced, crying out, "Give the lie to the devil." The Muslims rallied, returned to the fight and climbed the hill. When I saw that the Franks withdrew, pursued by the Muslims, I shouted for joy, "We have beaten them." But the Franks rallied and charged again like the first time and drove the Muslims back to my father. He acted as he had done on the first occasion, and the Muslims turned upon the Franks and drove them back to the hill. I again shouted, "We have beaten them." But my father rounded on me and said, "Be quiet. We have not beaten them until that tent, guys, falls." As he was speaking to me, the tent fell. The Sultan dismounted, prostrated himself in thanks to God Almighty and wept for joy.